Good day to all of you. We are the Group 6, and today we are going to tackle about the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF. So basically, what is International Monetary Fund? The IMF is an international organization that promotes global economic growth and financial stability. It also encourages international trade and reduces poverty. So let us understand more about IMF. So the origin of IMF was it was funded around the world in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference. It came into formal existence in 1945. The IMF's primary methods for achieving these goals are monitoring capacity building and lending. The IMF makes loans to countries that are experiencing economic distress to prevent or mitigate financial crisis. Since the Bretton Woods system collapsed in the 1970s, the IMF has promoted the system of floating exchange rates, meaning that market forces determine the value of currencies relative to one another. This system continues to be in place today. So to sum up, the International Monetary Fund have been funded just like the United Nations after World War II. Because after the war, if everyone wanted peace. However, peace on an empty stomach is hard to maintain. So one of these institutions, or the IMF, were meant to help economic stability of the world. And this is basically a bank, but instead of being started by individuals, they've been started by the countries. Most of the world's countries are members of this institution, or the IMF. The IMF main goal is helping countries which are currently in trouble and who cannot get money by other means. And the IMF in these cases is kind of like a lender of last resort, who you go to when nobody else is willing to give you money. And this report is also divided into 4 parts: the objectives, the rules, the functions, and effects of the IMF on the government. And I'm going to elaborate the first one. So, objectives of IMF, or International Monetary Fund, are here as follows. So the first one, international monetary cooperation. The most important objective of the fund is to establish international monetary cooperation amongst the various member countries through a permanent institution, because that it provides the machinery for consultation and collaborations in various international monetary problems and issues. Number 2 is they ensure exchange stability. Another important objective of the fund that is to ensure stability in the foreign exchange rates by maintaining orderly exchange arrangement among members, and also to rule out unnecessary competitive exchange depreciations. So number 3 is the balanced growth of trade. So IMF has also another important objective. So it to promote international trade so as to achieve its required expansion and balanced growth. This will ensure development of the production resources and thereby promote and maintain high levels of income and employment among all its member countries. Number 4, eliminate exchange control. So another important objective is to eliminate or relax exchange controls that is imposed by almost each and every country before Second World War, as a device to deliberately fix the exchange rate at a particular level. So such elimination of exchange controls was made as to give encouragement to the flow of international trade. Number 5, the multilateral trade and payments. So to establish a multilateral trade and payment system in the respect to current transaction between members in place of the old system of bilateral trade agreements was another important objective of the IMF. Number 6, the balanced growth. So also another objective of IMF, that is to help the members countries, especially the backward countries, to attain balanced economic growth by exchange the level of employment. And then number 7 is correction of BOP maladjustments. So it is also helps the member of countries in eliminating or reducing the disequilibrium or maladjustments in balance of payments. So accordingly, it gives confidence to members by selling or lending funds, foreign currency resources to the member nations. And the last one is the promote investments of capital. So finally, the IMF also promotes siya og kanang flow of capital from richer to poorer, or as what we can call the backward countries. So as to help the backward countries to develop their own economic resources for attaining higher standard of living for its people in general.
A while ago, one of my group mates discussed about the objective of International Monetary Fund, and now I'll be going to explain or discuss also the roles of International Monetary Fund or IMF. So, the International Monetary Fund works to foster the global monetary cooperation, secure financial stability, facilitate international trade, promote high employment, and sustainable economic, and lastly, reduce poverty around the world. So, how does really International Monetary Fund works? Well, International Monetary Fund provides a temporary aid in order to help these particular countries to cope up from the crisis they are facing. Like for example, helping one country that was destroyed from a natural disaster. One of the example that I could give to this is the Super Typhoon Yolanda, which happened here in the Philippines way back 2013. There are many people who have died. There are many infrastructures who are destroyed by the typhoon. There are a lot of damages brought by the Yolanda. So the IMF helps the Philippines in providing or giving an assistance to the Philippines. So that is the example.
At this point, I'm going to report about the functions of IMF. The IMF employs three main functions, namely the surveillance, the financial assistance, and the technical assistance in order to promote the stability of the international monetary and financial system. So the first function is surveillance. The IMF closely monitors each member country's economic and financial developments and holds a policy dialogue with the member country on a regular basis, usually once each year, to assess its economic conditions with a view to providing policy recommendations. The IMF also reviews global and regional developments and outlook based on information from individual consultations. The IMF publishes such assessment on the multilateral surveillance through the World Economic Outlook and the Global Financial Stability Report on a semi-annual basis. The second function is the financial assistance or the lending. The IMF lends to its member countries facing balance of payments problem in order to facilitate the adjustment process and restore member countries' economic growth and stability through various loans, instruments, or facilities. An IMF loan is usually provided under an arrangement requiring a borrowing country to undertake the specific policies and measures to resolve its balance of payments problem as specified in a letter of intent. Most IMF loans are primarily financed by its member countries through payments of quotas. Thus, the IMF's lending capacity is mainly determined by the total amount of quotas. Nevertheless, if necessary, the IMF may borrow from a number of its financially strongest member countries through the new arrangement of borrow, or the NAB, or the General Arrangement Borrow, or the GAB. The third function is the technical assistance. The IMF provides technical assistance to help member countries strengthen their capacity to design, and implement effective policies in four areas, namely 1. The monetary and financial policies, 2. The fiscal policy and management, 3. The statistics, and 4. The economic and financial legislation. So in addition to technical assistance, the IMF also offers training courses and seminars to member countries at the IMF Institute in Washington, D.C., and other regional training institutes such as Austria, Brazil, China, India, Singapore, Tunisia, and United Arab Emirates.
Now we are at the last part of the report, and that is the effects of IMF or International Monetary Fund on the government, especially in the Philippines. Let's talk first about the advantages of the International Monetary Fund. The IMF assists member nations in several different capacities, such as it provides loans to member nations. The IMF can attach conditions to these loans, including prescribed economic policies to which borrowing governments must comply. The other one is to fill deficit gaps. If a country has a balance of payments deficit, the IMF can step in to fill the gap. Lastly, technical support and assistance. It serves as a counsel and advisor to countries attempting a new economic policy. It also publishes papers on new economic topics. Moving forward, let's also tackle about the cons of the IMF. Despite of its lofty status and commendable objectives, the IMF has also disadvantages. Thus, it suffers criticism for the following. First, too much or too little intervention. The IMF has been criticized for not doing much and for overreaching. It has been criticized for being too slow or too eager to assist failing national policies. Since the United States and Japan feature prominently in IMF policies, it has been accused of being a tool for free market countries only. Simultaneously, free market supporters criticize the IMF for being too interventionist. Second, it creates moral hazard. Some member nations, such as Italy and Greece, have been accused of pursuing unsustainable budgets because they believe the world community led by the IMF would come to the rescue. This is no different than the moral hazard created by government bailouts of major banks. Moreover, the Philippines joined the IMF on December 27, 1945, and its quota or subscription capital is about 871 million US dollar. And here are some of the effects of IMF and the Philippines. First, infrastructure development. The Philippines increased spending on roads, bridges, air and seaports, and other large-scale projects in recent years. Public infrastructure investment rose from an average of 3% of GDP during 2011 to 2016 to over 5% in 2018, with a target of raising the ratio to over 6% by 2022. The government's Build program includes large projects that address major bottlenecks, focusing on transportation, water resources, and energy. These projects are expected to bring important benefits to the Philippine economy and to the lives of ordinary citizens. Better transportation and internet services. For example, it would help farmers bring their produce such as bananas and mangoes to markets and raise the income of the rural population. More generally, improvements in the quality of infrastructure services will cut the cost of doing business, attract more investment, and enhance productivity around the country. Second, special drawing rights. It is an international type of monetary reserve currency created by the IMF in 1969. It operates as a supplement to the existing money reserves of member countries. In fact, just recently in August, the Philippines received $2.8 billion worth of special drawing rights from the International Monetary Fund as part of the latter's effort to help countries recover from the coronavirus pandemic. The last one on our list is debt increases. The Philippine government's debt climbed further to 11.6 trillion as of the end of July 2021 as the country borrowed more money to fund programs like IMF amid falling revenues as most industries stopped operating because of the outbreak of the coronavirus. All in all, the IMF plays a vital role in stabilizing economic instability not just in the Philippines but to all involved countries. That would be all. Thanks for listening.